Hey guys, welcome to the 15th part of the subdivision modeling training series for Cinema 4D. Now recently I've been getting some requests to do a tutorial on how to model a honeycomb type pattern. So this is something that I recently did for the front grille of that box workstation animation that I recently uploaded. So I'm going to show you how to make a honeycomb type pattern using Polygon Modeling, and then we'll use the Hypernurb in order to subdivide it. So the first thing that I like to do when doing this is start with a disk. So I'm going to go to a top view, and I'm going to change the display to Gerald shading lines and to wireframe. So we're going to start with a disk, and I'm going to take the disk segments and just bring that down to 1. The rotational segments, we need to take that to 6. And for the inner radius, we're going to take that to a value of 75. Okay, so what I usually like to do is rotate this 30 degrees. That way, this point here will be pointing straight up. So I'm going to grab the rotate tool. I'm going to click, hold down shift, and then rotate that 30 degrees. Now if we go back to the move tool, you can see that the axis handle is actually rotated off 30 degrees as well. But I want it to be centered back. So if we were to try to rotate that back, it's going to rotate the mesh as well. So first of all, we want to make the disk editable. So let's go ahead and just make that editable. And now we need to enable the axis modification mode. So we'll turn that on. We'll grab the rotate tool again. And we're just going to click, hold down shift, and then drag that back 30 degrees. Grab the move tool again. Now the axis handle is pointing in the correct direction. So we'll just get out of this axis modification mode. So now what we need to do is go into point mode, and what we need to do here is determine a measurement. So I'm going to go up here to Tools, Measure and Construction, and what this tool here does, you can see that it gives you an arrow, and I think I went over this before in a previous tutorial. But this just gives you this red arrow, and there's a point on each end of it, and you can just drag those points wherever you want them in order to get a measurement between two objects or 2 points. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to click one of those points, and we want to drag it over here to the point on the mesh on this corner. Then we want to grab this point here, and we want to pull this down to here, but notice that it's not snapping to the center. So what we want to do is enable snapping. So we'll just come over here and click enable snapping, and now we can snap that. You can see it is snapping. Okay, so now we have a measurement value here of 86.603. Now it's also coming up over here in the distance attribute. So I'm going to double click that, right click and choose copy, because we're going to need to paste that in here in a minute. So we can just hit delete measure. That will delete that. Go back to the move tool to get out of that tool, and we can turn off snapping because we don't need it right now. Okay, now with the disk object selected, we want to go to MoGraph Cloner, but I'm going to hold down the Alt key. I'm going to click the cloner, and that will put a cloner in the same position as the axis for the disk. So we'll get out of point mode, and we need to change the orientation for this. So I'm going to take the count up to 10. And we need to change the Y value to 0, and we want to go in the plus X direction. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the X and we're going to put in a value here. So we're going to paste the value in that we copied from the Measure and Construction tool. Hit enter, and you can see that this is only half of what we need. We need to double this up because it's only going half the distance. So we'll just make an inline calculation. So right after the 3 here for this number, I'm just going to type in ×2, and now we have all of these lined up where they need to be. So there's our first row of honeycomb shapes. Okay, so what we want to do now before we go any further is make some adjustments to this disk. So I'm going to click on the disk, not the cloner object, but the disk. I'm going to go into Polygon mode, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go down here to subdivide, and I'm going to click on the little box for that. That's going to bring up the window for it, and I'm going to change the count to 2. and that's going to subdivide by a value of 2. Now I know you're probably looking at that and thinking, well, that's quite a bit. Why do we need all that? Well, you would be right. There is quite a bit of subdivision there, but we're going to need some of it, and the other part we're just going to dissolve it and get it out of the way. So we want to go into edge mode, and I'm just going to zoom down here to a corner, and we want to use the loop selection on this outside loop, hold down shift to select the second one, and I'm going to right click and choose stitch and sew. And I'm going to click here where the point would be if we were in point mode, because right now we're in edge mode, and I'm just going to click and drag this over to here. And what we've done is we've taken those two edges, those two selection of edges, and we've just combined them into one, which was the outer one. So I'm going to do the loop selection again to select this one. I'm going to go back to the stitch and sew. I'm going to click here, off to here, and then we'll do this one more time for this inner one. All right, now we'll go back to a top view. I'm going to grab the live selection, and we're still in edge mode. I'm going to deselect those edges. And what we want to do here is we want to dissolve some of these edges. Now, the ones that we want are not going to be the one here for the corner. These corner edges here, and the top and the bottom, we don't want to dissolve those. And we don't want to dissolve the ones that are closest to those corners. The ones that we want to dissolve are the center ones. So between this corner here and this corner here, the very center edge would be this one. So we want to click that center one, this one here, this one down here, that one, and this one here. Now the reason why we're selecting these is because we don't need them. They're not providing any type of help for us at all. It's just creating extra unwanted geometry. So we're going to right click and choose dissolve. Now if we were to take that disk and drop it into a Hypernurb, now what we have is a honeycomb shape. Alright, so I'm just going to undo that to get rid of the Hypernurb. Okay, so I'm going to click on the disk, and what we'll do here is we'll do a loop selection on this inside edge, grab the move tool, hold down control, click and drag down, and let's grab the knife tool, and I'm going to go into loop mode, and I'm going to make a cut on that extrusion that we just made up towards the top, about right there. Now if yours is not cutting properly in loop mode, you may need to disable restrict to selection, or if you have that on, just be sure that no edges are selected. Okay, so that takes care of that, so we can get out of the edge mode. So there is our first row. So now I'm going to take the cloner object, I'm going to duplicate it, and it needs to go up, but it also needs to go over because the honeycomb pattern is offset, kind of like a checkerboard. So this needs to go up, but it also needs to go over and sit about right there. Now we could try to do this manually, but what's going to happen is more than likely doing it manually, you're going to have some points that are going to be offset slightly. And that's going to cause for some problems later on if you're modeling a large array of this honeycomb type pattern. So what we could do is just for the X value, we can paste in the value that we got from the measure and construction tool. That way we know it's over in the X direction correctly, and then we can just drag this up to where it sits into place. Now notice that the value that's coming up in the viewport says 150.181. Now that's very close to 150. So we can come over here to the Z coordinates, and let's just take off the 181 on the end, hit enter, and now we know that it's 150, and now these are lined up perfectly. So we can take the two cloner objects and select them, make them editable, expand them, select the first null, shift select the last disk in the second null, and then use the connect objects plus delete command. And if you don't know how to get to that, that will be under mesh, conversion, connect objects plus delete. So we need to go into point mode, make sure you don't have any points selected, and we just need to run the optimize command one time just to make sure that all those points are welded, that we have one solid object. Okay, so let's take this cloner object and duplicate it. And we just want to raise this up to where it sits into place right about there. And notice that the little readout in the viewport is telling us that it's 300.611. So it's very close to 300. So that means that the distance that we need to go up in the z-axis is 300. So I'm just going to type in 300 to round that out. And there we go. Now we know that that is centered properly where it needs to be. So I'm going to duplicate this again. And this time it's going to be a little different because we already have a value of 300 there. So what we need to do is just type in an inline calculation and just say plus 300. And there you go. Now we'll do one more. And we have a value of 600. So I'm just going to type in plus 300. And that's all there is to it. So we can take these four, select them, use the connect objects plus delete. Go back into point mode, and let's just optimize that one more time just to make sure that all of those are welded properly. I'm going to raise this up so we can see a little better. And there is our honeycomb pattern. So what we'll do is we'll drop this into a Hypernurb. Now by default, the Hypernurb comes in 2x3, so let's just try a value of 1. Drop that in. There you go. That looks pretty good. So let's see what happens if we take it up to 2. All right, so I'm just going to leave it at 2 for right now, but it really doesn't look like we need to go any higher than that. We could probably get away with a value of 1. All right, so that is how you do the honeycomb pattern. Now, there's a couple of issues here that we can quickly address, and that would be we've got this side over here that needs to be closed in, as well as this side over here. So what we can do, I'm just going to turn the Hypernurb off. I'm going to go into point mode. Actually, I'll tell you what, let's go into edge mode instead. And I'm going to use the bridge tool. So I'm going to right click and choose bridge. I'm going to go from this edge here, and I'm going to bridge it over to this edge. Now that's going to leave a hole there. Now most people would just think that you can just use the bridge tool and just keep bridging these gaps. So let's see what happens when we do that. Let's take from here and bridge over to here, and then we'll bridge that gap there as well. Now, looking at it, it looks as though that it's closed off. So let's take the knife tool, and we'll go into line mode, and let's continue this cut here. Just continue that on out to the edge. That way that edge doesn't just come to a complete stop, it continues on out. Now that looks pretty good. And we're working in quads, you can see. But let's see what happens if we go into point mode. And let's grab point there. And let's pull that point up. Uh-oh, we have a hole. So obviously, using the bridge tool to bridge those gaps like we just did, that's not going to work. Now what we could do is we could just come up here to use the optimize command. Then we'll go back, and now it's taken care of. So that's one way of doing it. You could use the bridge tool like that, then use the knife tool to continue the cuts out, but then you have to run the optimize command. Otherwise, you're going to be left with a hole. So let me show you another way to do it. So we'll go back into edge mode, and I'm going to use the bridge tool again. I'm going to bridge the gap from here over to here on the outside, and I'm going to use the close polygon hole tool to close that up. Then we'll grab the knife tool, and we'll finish off these cuts. And now we'll select the point. And you can see by doing that, now we don't have to run the optimize command because that hole is no longer there. So there are two different ways of doing that. The first method using the bridge tool to bridge those in, but then you have to, of course, use the knife tool to continue the cut and then run optimize, or you could just use the bridge on the outside, then use close polygon hole for the inside, and then use the knife tool to take those edges and continue the cut on out to the very end. All right, now over here on this corner here, on this end, what we could do is use the bridge tool. We need to go into edge mode, and we need to bridge the gap there. We can also bridge that gap there, but notice that we've got a triangle here. So let's go ahead and use the Close Polygon Hole tool to close that in. Let's go with the knife tool. I'm going to go to a top view, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take from here, from this point right here, I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to click and drag down. That's going to make a cut. Now notice what we've got here is two triangles. So the way to solve this is in edge mode, click that center edge that's dividing the two triangles and just use the dissolve command on it. Now go into point mode, grab this point here and just pull that down. Now we have quads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So just like that, we solved the issue. Now I'm not going to go through this and do every single one of them because there are quite a few of them to do, but if you want to close that off, then that's how you would do that. So there's one more thing we can address, and that would be this edge here, because you may want to put a sharp corner on that, because if we turn the Hypernurb on, you can clearly see the edge is kind of not taking the correct shape that we want it to, because you may want it to be kind of squared off here on the corner. So in that case, all you need to do is go to point mode. You can take this edge here and pull that down. Take this one here and we can pull it down as well. Let's see, we'll take this one all the way to the corner. That will be our corner point. All right, now we'll turn the Hypernurb on. You can see it's still a little too rounded. So what we want to do is we want to take this point back here, and I'm going to change the display, we can see it a little better. We'll take this point and just push it over. Now notice the closer we go, the sharper the corner gets. So we'll push that over to about there. We'll take this one and we'll bring it down to about there. Now the corner is nice and sharp. Now that might be a little too sharp, so you can always take these and just kind of move them out to round that corner out, depending on what look you're going for. So that is how you do the honeycomb pattern. As you can see, it's all quads, all polygon modeled. The Hypernurb is being used for the subdivision, and because it is highly subdivided like this, you can actually use a deformer on it and it will be nice and smooth using the deformer. So just real quick, let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's grab a bin deformer and we'll make it a child of the cloner. Need to bring it up, and more than likely we need to rotate it. So let me just put it into place here. And let's see, if we play around with the strength, okay, so what we need to do is we need to rotate it. So I'm going to grab the rotate tool and just rotate this 90 degrees in that direction. All right, so I'm only going to bend part of this. I don't want to bend the whole thing. Okay, now we'll use the strength and we'll take that up, and more than likely we may need to turn on keep y-axis length, and we'll take the strength to where this bends to about right there. So about 115 degrees for the strength will work for now. So we'll just pull all of this up, and I'm going to hide the bin deformer. And there we go. So you can see, because it is highly subdivided, the bin deformer is actually providing some very nice results. So you really don't even have to model this bending. You can actually just model it flat and then use a bin deformer on it to kind of push it around to where you want it to go. And we could probably go a little further with this. Let's take the bin deformer push that back to about there. Let's see if I can get this to be somewhat of a cylinder shape here. All right, that'll work for now. So there is our honeycomb cylinder. And all we had to do was model a flat honeycomb shape. And again, because it is highly subdivided by the Hypernurb, and it was already subdivided well enough, actually, because if we turn the Hypernurb off, you can see that it's still working really well. But of course, the Hypernurb provides the nice rounding and smoothing to it. Okay, so there is the honeycomb shape and how to create it. Hopefully this has given you guys an idea of how to do it. This is kind of mimicking the other tutorial where I made the vent holes. The only difference was those were round and circular, whereas these are honeycomb shaped. So I guess that about wraps up this part. So again, thank you guys for watching, and I'm going to have more modeling tutorials coming soon when I have the time to make them. I've got a couple more in the works and a couple ideas that I'm working on. So those should be coming soon, hopefully. So thank you again for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next tutorial.